There'll now be a moment for silent prayer or meditation. Please, members, you may take your seats. Honorable delegates, may I take this opportunity and welcome you to the sitting of today, as well as our special delegates who have joined in both physically and on the virtual platform. And our special greetings to the Minister of Basic Education, Honorable Kwarube. You are always welcome in the NCOP. So this is your second house. So each time we invite you, we remain grateful to the fact that you are available to take your responsibility in terms of responding to the questions as posed by the honorable members. Having said that, honorable members, may I equally remind you of the rules, in particular sub-rule 21, 22, and 23 of Rule 103 that applies in this sitting. And in accordance with the Council Rule 229, Sub-Rule 1, there will be no notices of motions or motions without notice. Honorable delegates, having said that, I would also like to further remind the delegates that in terms of Rule 229 of the Council Rule, the time for reply by the ministers to a question is 5 minutes. Only 4 supplementary questions are allowed per question. A member who has asked the initial question would be the first one to ask a supplementary question to the minister. And the time for a supplementary question allocated is only 2 minutes. And accordingly, the minister will be afforded 4 minutes to respond to the follow-up questions. I now take this opportunity and invite the Minister of Basic Education to respond to question number 7 that is asked by Honorable Feni. Over to Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. It's always so good to be in the NCOP and to answer questions to the honorable members. Honorable Member, Chairperson, the issue of scholar transport is critical in ensuring that learners, especially in rural, remote, and high-risk areas, are able to access schooling safely and consistently. It is, however, a shared intergovernmental function. Implementation takes place at a provincial level, working across education and transport authorities, while the National Department of Basic Education and the Department of Transport work on policy, coordination, monitoring, and support. However, we can't ignore, Chairperson, some of the carnage we've seen involving some of our learners on the roads. And so it has become very important for us to prioritize making scholar transport safe for learners, particularly those who come from far-flung areas. In relation to addressing the gap of provision, the Department of Basic Education is working with the Department of Transport on the review of the National Learner Transport Policy. That review is aimed at strengthening key areas such as planning, safety, security, beneficiary criteria, service design, procurement, and contract management. And we think that the working between these two departments is going to help us in terms of being able to strengthen how scholar transport is delivered in the country so that we can keep our learners safe, but at school on time. In parallel, the DBE is continuing to support provinces through our intergovernmental structures by focusing on matters such as learner identification, route planning, prioritization of rural and farm school routes, and the monitoring of provincial plans and expenditure. It's important because learner transport is funded through the provincial equitable share and must be planned and implemented effectively at a provincial level. And this is where I would implore members of this House to really help us with holding our provinces to account when it comes to some of these matters, because scholar transport is squarely funded through the equitable share that provinces receive. And so we must hold the executive at all levels to account to make sure that money is spent where it needs to go. And where it needs to go to areas like scholar transport, those things need to be happening. Of course, from a national department level, we're responsible for monitoring and supporting our provinces. In relation to the safe and reliable access, the department is working with the transport and law enforcement agencies, including Road Traffic Management Corporation, to strengthen compliance with transport and road traffic laws. This includes attention to roadworthiness of cars, legal operating requirements, pre-contract inspections, and compliance checks. Chairperson, the focus is therefore very clear: to improve the coordination, the strengthening, the planning, and tighten the safety oversight and support to provinces that learner transport is safer, is more dependable, more responsive to the needs of learners who have to travel long distances, particularly those learners who find themselves in rural and far-flung areas. More importantly, for me, what is most important as we are strengthening our policy around scholar transport is making sure that we keep our learners safe and that scholar transport is dependable and that they're able to get to school on time for protecting learning and teaching. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I now take this opportunity and afford Honorable Fanny to ask a supplementary question to the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for the response. We acknowledge and appreciate the involvement of the Department of Transport and its agencies. However, I would like to know whether the Department of Education in the provinces, like the Eastern Cape province, have the necessary capacity to do the vetting and accreditation of vehicles that carry the learners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Fanny. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And as I indicated before, because it's an intergovernmental service, in many provinces, for instance, where Honorable Fanny comes from, in the Eastern Cape, for instance, the function is actually run solely by the Department of Transport. And the Department of Education in the Eastern Cape is but a beneficiary of that. So in some provinces, these things are more difficult than others to manage. And that's why I was saying it's a multi-governmental layered approach where we've got provinces doing this at the bottom, but we also have Minister Creasy and I looking at a uniform policy that we can have. I think it's also important, because we've got this intergovernmental nexus at which we work, that we place where things are, where we place the responsibility where it needs to go. The Department of Transport is very much, it has the capacity to vet and accredit, and using some of the entities would really be useful to us. So that's why we're not saying it's not only the provinces that must work together. Minister Creasy and I should work together to see how she can use some of the entities under the Department of Transport in making sure that we as a client department are also designing a policy that covers both departments, but that also guides provinces on what needs to happen. Because what worries me is that the implementation on the ground, sometimes policy making can be here, but the implementation on the ground can be something very different. In fact, earlier this week, late last week, I was in a community and I saw for myself somebody who had literally had children who were overcrowded in that car. When I stopped him, he said, well, I can take them all off. And so the point I'm trying to make is that we've got to strengthen the law enforcement part a lot more than is currently happening. And so I think with the working together of the Department of Transport, we will be able to make sure that law enforcement and the vetting and the accreditation happens so that we can also make sure that on our side we do our part. But I also want to say, honorable members, that I'm also imploring parents to really pay close attention to private providers in particular who ferry their children to school. Because some of the things that we are seeing are really, really disheartening and can be avoided if, for instance, there's better driving on the road, and also we avoid issues like overcrowding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next follow-up question is from Honorable Skier Kochel.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the House, Minister. Minister, where does the national department's responsibility end and provincial department's responsibilities start? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So it's a shared responsibility. The Department of Basic Education essentially sets policy, it sets legislation, it sets regulations. And from a provincial point of view, they are responsible for the planning, they're responsible for the spending, they're also responsible for making sure that they identify learners who are worthy of scholar transport. Remember that we have a criteria that is set that says which learners are eligible to be able to have scholar transport. For instance, learners with special needs. For instance, learners who are living in rural and farm areas. So provinces are responsible for identifying those learners, and then provinces are also responsible for allocating the adequate amount of money that is required in order for the scholar transport function to happen. You'll recall a couple of years ago, and I use the Eastern Cape as an example, that the Eastern Cape Department of Education and Transport were both taken to court on the delivery of scholar transport. So those things are really, really quite critical, that to understand that Minister Creasy and I can set the framework, but the implementation in a department like mine does sit with the provinces. But we're not only just saying that's a provincial function, because of course, this is our entire government and we need to view it as such. And these are 13.7 million learners, don't care if the responsibility sits with who and who. We just need to make sure that they're in fact ferried to school in safe and on time. And so that's why we are saying that we are taking our responsibility as a Department of Education at a national level to say we will do stronger monitoring, we'll support the provinces so that they can do this work, so that this work is not something that slips through the cracks. Because when we don't get scholar transport right, lives can be lost, as we've recently seen in Gauteng. So that's where the differentiator is. But as I said, going far beyond that, we have to support provinces, and that's why we've taken the decision to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up question is from Honorable Keza, who has joined in on a virtual platform. Over to you, Honorable Keza.
Ish. You.
Okay, we
Thank you
allow
very
you
much.
to switch off your
My video now.
camera, Honorable Keza. Yes, you may
Yes.
proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair, for that rescue. Thank you very much, Chair. Honorable Minister, the crisis of scholar transport remains a national shame as learners across all 9 provinces are still subjected to unsafe, unreliable, and undignified conditions in their pursuit of education. In rural provinces such as Mpumalanga and in the Eastern Cape, the situation is particularly dire. In Mpumalanga, for an example, children in Khalek Farm in Emakhazen local municipality continue to walk long and dangerous distances to school, crossing rivers and busy roads without any formal transport support. With many routes impassable during heavy rains, yet this department, along with the provincial departments, continues to extend outdated contracts for scholar transport that is unsuitable for these terrains. In light of this, what concrete steps have you taken in monitoring along with the provincial departments to conduct audits of rural roads conditions so as to ensure that scholar transport tenders use scholar transport tender use dignified and suitable vehicle for the terrain, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Honorable Keza. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Absolutely. I think, as I indicated before, that regardless of the fact that there's delineated functions and there's delineated responsibilities, ultimately, we all share the responsibility of keeping our learners safe. And so you asked a question around unroadworthiness in particular. So, Chairperson, any vehicle that's used for learner transport must fully comply with the legal safety requirements. In that regard, enforcement authorities, including the Road Traffic Management and Cooperation and other traffic law enforcement bodies, are important partners in tackling this issue of unroadworthiness, unsafe operations, overloading, and non-compliance. And so the DBE is working very closely with these partners to make sure that pre-contract inspections are done, regular compliance checks are done, enforcement operations and actions against unsafe vehicles are undertaken. Where the problem we find is where there are private arrangements that are used outside of this properly managed provincial systems, the risk is higher because what happens is that parents enter into a contract arrangement with somebody in the community and where we aren't able then to do those pre-contract checks. But from a point of view of government entering into a contract with people who are providing scholar transport, that work is very clear. And law enforcement agencies know what it is that they need to look out for. Additionally, as I said, we are updating the policy on scholar transport alongside with the Department of Transport and ourselves, because what we want to do is we want to strengthen that policy so that it can guide provinces on what happens in an environment where there's an independent provider. What kind of requirements must that person have? Do we make sure that they've got the PDP, for instance? We make sure that their vehicles are roadworthy, even though they may be private providers. So that's why we're looking at the service model to say the issue is not necessarily the 800,000 learners that we are transporting every day. The issue lies in sometimes the private service providers where we are not having a closer look at. And that's why Minister Creasy and I want to increase this work with the review of the policy so that we can have a closer eye on even the private providers, because that's when the risk of safety for learners becomes a lot higher. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next speaker has joined in through the visual platform, Honorable Briet. You may ask the Minister the follow-up question.
Thank you, Chairperson. I do appreciate. I think it was somebody else before me. Oh, no, sorry. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Minister, thank you so much for your answer. I think we all share the passion for scholar transport and the problem with it. I appreciate and welcome the fact that we are reviewing the policy and ensuring that that gets supplemented down to our provinces. My problem, however, is with the monitoring of not only these contracts, but also of these physical vehicles. We see a lot of them, the first, say, term having wonderful vehicles, and then by the second or third term, they have their, a vehicle that is not the one that they contracted for initially. So, and to me, that gets back to law enforcement and having boots on the ground. So, Honourable Minister, I want to know from you, what is your department and Honourable Creasy's department doing in ensuring that SAPS and all of the provincial community safety departments are actually equipping and also having enough staff on the ground to be able to fulfill this monitoring function? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Briet. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I agree with you that sometimes the discrepancy comes in where somebody, even with pre-contractual checks that provinces do, that they'll then abandon the car that they were contracting on and use something else. And I think that's where continuous monitoring on the side of provinces needs to happen, because it cannot be that you contracted on a particular vehicle that is roadworthy, that is certified. And that's why, in my view, that anybody who's ferrying learners should be able to be easily identifiable by members of the community, even if it's something that says that is written there, you know, ferrying learners. If my driving is reckless, please call this number. Those are some of the things I think we need to build into that policy discussion. Because ultimately, even members of the public should be able to say, no. I can report this person. I can see that this car is overloaded, or I can see that this driver is being reckless. So I think continuous assessment of the roadworthiness of the cars is important, but also I think just vigilance from the schools as well is incredibly important. And I think, again, I want to make this point that the law enforcement agencies that work with Minister Creasy's department, they have been more than cooperative with us to say, look, we will do the checks that you need us to do. We will try and have more boots on the ground. We will try and identify when are the peak hours. It's usually early in the mornings and in the afternoons when children are being picked up. So we are receiving that kind of support. But in my view, unless we all coordinate from a DBE, Department of Transport, Provincial Education Department, Provincial Transport Department, and unless we all coordinate into this review of this policy, there's still going to be gaps. And that's, for me, is where we need to fill in those gaps and make sure that we come up with something concrete that South Africans can see that we take this matter seriously, because it's about the safety of their children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. We are now proceeding to the next question, which is question number 14. It's in relation to the early grade reading proficiency. Honourable Adrianse has asked the question to the Minister. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. The findings of the Funda Uphumelele National Survey, which we collected in 2025 and released in November 2025, confirm what other assessments have shown to us. Too many children are falling behind in reading and in the early grades. This is precisely why foundational learning, especially literacy and numeracy in grades R to 3, have been placed at the center of our work. This is literally one of our key priorities. And we've said we want to reorientate the education system to put value on the foundations of learning. Because, members, if you have a shaky foundation, the learning losses later in life are almost impossible to overcome. If children don't have a strong grasp of foundational numeracy and literacy, then we see this later in the years in their inability to take on gateway subjects, in their inability to be able to take on, maths, science, technology, accounting. And we lament those things, but because we neglected the foundations, that's where we need to make sure that we are strengthening our efforts. And so first, what are we doing about this? So since the release of the survey, the department has focused on ensuring that these findings, these are not just reports that gather dust, that these findings are translated into practical and at a district and at a circuit and at a school level, so that we can see the learnings, but we can see how it shifts the focus. Number 2, the survey benchmarks have been built into core tools that shape classroom practice. This includes ongoing revision of the annual teaching plans and the foundation phase benchmarked aligned to assessments for teachers and subject advisors, including a strengthened early grade reading assessment toolkit. Thirdly, the department is improving the support for remediation. Updated classroom tools are being updated together with remedial manual so that learning gaps can be identified early. As I indicated, if we identify learning gaps much later, the remedial actions are either too costly or will simply not be effective. Fourthly, the survey findings and benchmarks have been incorporated into our lesson plans, into our training manuals, and these materials will be initially rolled out to 5,000 teachers, and the lessons and the processes that will be used to strengthen further implementation. But I think for me, most excitingly, honorable members, for the annual performance plan of 2026 and 2027, it now includes an actual indicator that looks at reviewing and strengthening the implementation plan for national reading strategy in the foundations or in the foundation phase. And I think that's important because we have to move away from simply advocacy around early child learning. We have to hold ourselves to account. We have to have you holding us to account. And so what I've said to the department that it's important that we insert these things into the annual performance plans so that when we go and report before Parliament, Parliament will ask us, how far are you with your literacy strategy? How far are you with your integrated support to improve literacy in grade R to 3? And in parallel to that, the mathematics, science, and technology grant is also being sharpened to drive stronger improvements in foundational numeracy. Again, we can lament about how children are not performing well in maths and science, but if we miss it right at the foundations, we are unlikely to get it right at the end. And so that's why I'm saying we're not only just simply saying this as rhetoric, we have now put it in our own performance plans so that you can hold us accountable. Because for me, my interest is to seeing the needle shift. More and more learners being able to read for meaning, more and more learners being able to count meaningfully and confidently, because it's only then that we can change our education system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honorable Adriense, you may ask the Minister the follow-up question.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. You basically covered my question and my follow-up, but I need to know, new teachers that's being trained, have their courses and are they going to be adapted to include this very essential part and investigation and survey that has been done so that we have them trained correctly right from the start? I welcome the fact that 5,000 teachers that's already trained are included in this, but those that are starting out now, has their syllabus been incorporated with this, and what's the future of that? Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member and Honourable Chair. It's a very important question, and one that I'm pleased to say we've been in very close working relationship with the Department of Higher Education and our universities, because historically, members, teachers who weren't very good at their job were sent to go and teach foundation phase, as though foundation phase is where talent goes to die. But we've actually realized that foundation phase teaching is a specialized skill. We've got to incentivize people to go to university, to go to institutions of higher learning, to learn the skill of teaching in the foundation phase. Because if we don't match the strategies to improve outcomes for children with the strategy to empower the teacher, we're not going to see the desired results. So one of the things that we've done to incentivize learners or students who are wanting to pursue a teaching profession, we've said that the Funza Lushaka bursary, a larger part of it needs to be allocated to people who are wanting to go to teach in the foundation phase. It's our way of incentivizing a lot more younger people into the profession. We've engaged with universities to say, and now we've got an exciting working relationship with UNISA. They've taken thousands of our grade R practitioners who were otherwise underqualified, because now that grade R is part and parcel of, is essentially part of schooling, compulsory schooling, you have to make sure that the grade R teacher that is there is actually a qualified educator. But there had been many grade R practitioners who were working in that space because we were not viewing it as a critical space. So we've allowed them, we've sourced funding to give them bursaries to go and get their degrees through UNISA. So we are really trying to match our efforts, right, around supporting the young ones, but also matching our efforts with supporting the teachers, because you cannot have this education system that leaves the teacher behind. And so I think with the reorientation that we've undertaken now, there's an understanding that the foundations of learning are important. From literally 2 years old, that's where we are targeting children to get into structured ECD centers. They need to be thriving by 5. By the time they get to grade R, they need to be cognitively developed enough to start schooling. But that has to be matched with qualified teachers, qualified practitioners. And that's the kind of work we are doing ongoing. And I'm excited about the partners who've come on board along with us.
Are you done, Minister?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Honorable Monday, you may ask the Minister the follow-up question.
Thank you, Minister. Data further shows that people in quintile 1 schools, which is the poorest schools, are 4 times more likely to be unable to read a single word than the learners in quintile 5 schools, which are wealthy schools. Now, my question, whether the department has any target interventions to assist the learners from the poorest schools in South Africa.
Thanks, Honorable Monday. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. It's an incredibly important question, and one that I like to illustrate with a very small example of what I call the 2 10-year-olds in South Africa. The tale of the 2 10-year-olds. The 1 10-year-old who has had a structured ECD center that they've had access to since they were 2 years old. They are being read to. They've got good nutrition. They go to school. They're able to read and read for meaning. By the time they turn 10, they are already very much fluent in language and in numeracy. And then there's the other 10-year-old, the one that you mentioned, in the quintile 1 school, who's in a village, who has never been to an ECD center, who faces the high chance of malnutrition, who probably interacts with a book for the very first time when they're 6 or 7 years old. And those 2 10-year-olds, those are the faces of South Africa's education system. And I think our moral obligation is to change the story of that more and more children need to get to a place where there's equal access to these things. And so what are we doing about it? Well, we're making sure that the mass registration drive, the Banapele mass registration drive, is targeting communities that are underserved, communities that are either in townships and rural areas, so that we can get our learners, our young children, already in an ECD center. What also are we doing? We're making sure that even schools in rural areas have grade R classrooms that are catered for, and making sure that have grade R.
Can you hold on, Honorable Minister? Honorable Nonkanyana. Honorable Nonkanyana, can you please mute yourself? Front table, can you please assist us? Sorry about Honorable Minister.
All right,
Honorable Nonkanyana, you are disrupting the session.
Hey, my time.
Sorry about that, Honorable Minister. You may proceed.
And so, Honorable Member, and so that's the question you ask is so poignant about the equity and the equality of our education system. And yes, there's definitely a focus, a lot more on quintiles 1 to 3 schools, making sure that those very children are able to read for meaning. But the other thing is, what we've found with surveys such as Funda Uphumelele and our approach to mother tongue-based bilingual education, which we've adopted as a strategy and as a priority, is that African languages are not a hindrance to literacy. In fact, they're a gateway to literacy. So when you teach children in their mother tongue in their earlier years, they are able to pick up an additional language, a third language, earlier on in life. So, in fact, we shouldn't treat home languages as though they're a disadvantage. Home language education is important, and that's actually how you bridge the gap between those kids who are able to read for meaning and those who can't. And so this is why surveys like this are important, because they're instructive to us about how do we utilize South African all South African languages to make sure that children are able to access and make sense of the world around them in complex concepts. So that's some of the exciting work that we're doing, but also having children in quintiles 1 to 3 schools in ECD and in schools helps us deal with the malnutrition problem. A lot of children in poor communities are stunted, and stunting is irreversible. And South Africa is not a poor country. No child should be going hungry or dying of malnutrition in our country. And so having these structured programs is going to help us be able to bridge that gap, elevate that inequality and that unequal footing in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. And once again, we apologize for the disruption that you had to endure whilst you were busy responding to the questions. And once again, honourable members on the virtual platform, can we remind you of the rules of this House that they need to be observed at all times, irregardless of where you are in terms of your connectivity. What has happened, Honorable Nonkanyana, is unheard of, particularly yourself. We are looking at you with high respect, and accordingly, please try and refrain from doing such. And that goes to all of us, honorable members, at all times. Honorable Muntwedi, can you ask your follow-up question?
Thank you very much, Chair. A very good day to everyone. Honorable Minister, I think you did respond to the steps that you're going to put in place in addressing the Funda Uphumelele National Survey. But I just want to find out from you to say, one, what consequences will follow if provincial education departments fail to implement the required reading interventions that you just spoke of? And another thing is that in your response also you spoke about preparing learners from as old as grade 2. And you will agree with me that these children are still at the ECD centers, and specifically not the structured ECD centers. Now, I want to ask your minister to say, what support are you giving to these ECD centers that are not structured so that they should indeed be part of preparing a learner from as early as grade 2?
Thank you very much, Honorable Ntwedi. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I think firstly, manqale kule mbuzo lo wokugqibela around ECD centers. The honorable member is absolutely correct. That's why we're talking about a coherent and a continuous education system. We are looking at an education system that looks at a 2-year-old until 18 years old and further education and training. If you're only looking at an education system that starts children at 6 years old, you have completely already failed. 80% of a child's development, the brain of a child's development, 80% of it happens before they turn 5. That is why we have to capture 2-year-olds literally into structured ECD centers where they have a nutrition, where they have a structured curriculum in place appropriate for their age, where they are taught these things and they have these cognitive games that they play, because we don't want to miss that window. It is such an injustice for me where we talk about poor performance of children in South Africa when I'm thinking, well, we've let them down by not capturing them earlier enough. So what are we doing to make sure that we are covering ECD centers? We have been fortunate enough to receive 10 billion Rand over the MTEF to spend on making sure that ECD centers are registered so that each child at an ECD center has access to 24 Rand a day per child. And that is the subsidy that Treasury has given us. But over and above that, we are working with private partners, philanthropic partners who are saying, we want to help you do more. We want you to scale. In fact, one of our first of its kind is a form of a blended financing model of the Education Outcomes Fund that we recently got into, which is about 500 million Rand which we've managed to raise with philanthropic partners who are going to go to our most rural provinces. So Eastern Cape, Northern Cape are going to be the beneficiaries of this fund, where these philanthropic partners are saying, let us help you scale, because we can see the size of the problem and we want to make sure that we are walking the journey with you. So we're not just only looking at government funding, we are also looking at how best we can be creative about attracting funding from other sources. We are also fortunate enough to also have thinking partners, and the World Bank is one of them, and a whole lot of others who are with us in this journey of saying, how do we design a curriculum for a 3-year-old? How do we design a curriculum for a 5-year-old? How does that differ? And also, some of our partners, more importantly, our corporate partners, have lifted their hands and they've said, look, if you want to have the practitioner in the ECD having an NQF level 4, we are happy to sponsor and take some of these practitioners to an institution to go gain that. So for me, this is more than just about children. It's now transforming communities, because a woman who was just running an ECD center in the back room of her home, all of a sudden has an opportunity to get some training, has an opportunity to be able to run a formal, fully subsidized ECD center. So those things really are quite exciting. In terms of consequences around provinces, look, as I said, we've included these things in our APPs. Our APPs with provinces usually align. So it means that there's been an overwhelming buying into this new strategy that we've embarked on. So I'm not expecting any kind of resistance from provinces. This is the strategy of the 7th administration, and I think we're all pulling in the same direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Good afternoon, honourable members. The next follow-up question will be put by the Honourable Peter.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Evening, Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, as you have said, matric results are the culmination of all schooling years, built on strong foundational learning. The recent Funda Uphumelele survey shows that only 3 in 10 grade 1 to grade 3 pupils can read at grade level. I do, however, commend the interventions your department has implemented to address these challenges. They show a step in the right direction. In that light, Honourable Minister, could you indicate the estimated timeline for when we could see significant improvements in reading proficiency in the Eastern Cape, and whether current early grade reading benchmarks are being met in the province underperforming schools? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Peter. And if you could reply to that, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for the question. You're absolutely right. And that's why I think I started off a little bit earlier by saying that for me, it was important to not only just talk about and advocate for foundations of learning, but to include it in our annual performance plan so that all of you can hold us accountable to say, you said you were going to do this, have you met that? Because for me, I think annual performance plans and the indicators in them should live through impact. We shouldn't just be doing a tick box exercise and saying, yes, we monitored 10 schools, yes, we did that. The real impact, as you indicate here, is whether or not more South African children are going to be able to read for meaning and count confidently. And that's, for me, is when we will know that all of these interventions are working. And so we are aggressive in trying to make sure that, one, we're utilizing mother tongue a lot more in our teaching. Obviously, the ECD strategy, which I was talking about, becomes very important. And of course, strengthening grade R, making sure that all children who are 6 are able to access grade R. But also, I think for me, excitedly, and I would hope that you would share this dream with me, in as much as people celebrate matric results, and really we should be very happy about how children are performing in matric. My view is that we should be as obsessed about matric results as we are about results of children who are able to read and read for meaning, or children who are ready for school. I dream of a time where the ELNA assessment that we do for children who are 5 turning 6, starting grade R, that we can start to celebrate those milestones. Because for me, that's a far more meaningful indicator. It shows you where the children are falling behind. It shows you where you must focus on. It's literally telling you how you must run your education system. The matric pass rate is an exit indicator. Those learners have now left our system. So for me, I really want the country, and I really hope I can have advocates in all of you to say the foundations are where it most matters. Because you see, the children you speak about, those who can't read for grade level, the reality is that they don't ever catch up. If a child can't read at grade 1 level in grade 1, they'll eventually progress to grade 3, but they're never going to be able to catch that learning loss. And you know where we find it the most? When they get to high school. Then they completely battle to write even a simple maths paper. Then that's why people ask me, why aren't children taking up more maths and science? Because ultimately, if you can't read for comprehension, you can't solve a maths problem. So this is why I'm obsessed about the work that we're doing at a foundation level. And I'm hoping you asked when the timelines. Well, firstly, all of these things are on the go immediately. But we have our systemic evaluation, our own systemic evaluation, which we have running in the country, which tests grade 3 learners. Also very excited. I really want to put a lot of emphasis on that grade R test that kids take next year, so that we can really see whether or not does it make a difference when if a child is in a structured ECD center, are they more ready for grade R than a child who isn't? Because then that's a proof case to parents to say, don't keep your children at school. Send them to an ECD center so that they can be ready for formal schooling. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honourable delegates, we move to the next question. It relates to the eradication of unsafe school structures. It was originally put by the Honourable M.F. Mokwele. We've been alerted to the fact that he's unable to pose the follow-up today and will be represented by the Honourable Feni. But Minister, if you can respond to question 8, please.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Unsafe school infrastructure, I want to agree with the member who asked the question about what measures are in place. But I want to take a step forward and say unsafe infrastructure undermines not only learner safety, but it undermines their dignity and the conditions for learning and teaching. And that goes both ways for learners and for teachers. And so it remains a priority for me and for the department and for the provincial education departments. The first point is that the delivery of school infrastructure is primarily the responsibility of provincial education departments. So I do ask members that when they do appear before you, please look at the infrastructure expenditure grants. They get a conditional grant, which we call the EIG grant. It's an infrastructure grant. If they are not spending accordingly, we need to call that out. We need to make sure that there shouldn't be a single province that can underspend on infrastructure, not when we have 140 billion rand backlog in school infrastructure. And so we have to hold ourselves to a far higher standard. And so first thing is that's what I'm explaining, that the national department's role sets the regulatory framework, monitors implementation, and makes sure that provides oversight and support. So we don't just simply hold our hands and say it's not our responsibility. We have to support provinces. We have to go and do oversight and actually verify that these reports that we are getting about the eradication of unsafe structures are actually accurate. To accelerate the eradication of unsafe structures, provinces must continue to spend on infrastructure for new schools, replacement schools, for upgrades, for additions, for rehabilitation, refurbishment, and most importantly, maintenance. And I think this needs to be really said, that a lot of some of the infrastructure issues that are taking us back is because even when new schools are built, principals, SGBs are not maintaining schools. And so then it ends up being another cycle. In addition to that, the National Department of Education had launched what we called the Accelerated School Infrastructure Delivery Initiative, ACD, which was meant to target interventions around serious backlogs across the country. So we are almost done with that. And remember, We also have SAFE, so the sanitation appropriate for education. Again, that was a fund that was sitting at DBE level. And now from the next financial year, from 2026 to 2027, the grants for infrastructure are going to be with the provinces. And so all new and replacement schools are expected to include services required for functional learning, including water and electricity, usable ablution facilities. This is important because we've got norms and standards that guide public school infrastructure. In Limpopo, the Provincial Education Department had started a condition assessments across all school infrastructure portfolio. That process will update the condition ratings of 3,600 assets and will help the province prioritize maintenance, upgrades, and the elimination of infrastructure that is not up to scratch. On timeframes, these depend on two issues. The scale of the backlog, as I've indicated, 140 billion rand in infrastructure backlog. That's what the sector faces. So on timeframes, it's the scale of the backlog, the readiness of projects for implementation, and the funding available in a fiscally constrained environment. And that's why I'm saying to you, Baba, that there can be no province that can come here and confidently say that they underspent on infrastructure when we have 140 billion rand backlog. Each province should be spending 100% of the infrastructure grant. And if they are not, one of the things that we're doing, if a province is underspending, we move money to a province that is spending. So ultimately, that province stands to lose if we don't utilize our money as we should. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's go to the follow-up question. As indicated, it'll come from Mr. Feni.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Honorable Minister. It was earlier reported in the media that Fariseni Secondary School in Tohoyando, one of 1,800 Limpopo schools flagged by the Provincial Education Department, that it still have a collapsing ceiling during lessons, more than 100 people squeezed into a single classroom, and learning taking place on veranda or under a tree. Then the question is whether there are any immediate remedial steps to assist in such a situation.
Thank you, Honorable Feni. Your reply, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. Rural provinces like Limpopo, Honorable Member, do face deeper historical backlogs. You remember there was years ago, there was an initiative to try and replace mud schools, remove asbestos from schools. But in places like Limpopo, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal, these provinces that are deeply rural, some of these backlogs still exist, and they exist in a real way. And so it's important then that a couple of things need to happen. And here are some of the practical steps. Number one, provinces must firstly improve their condition assessment data. The quality of data is important. And I often say this not only to the team, but to the MECs as well, that the quality of data becomes important because it guides your spending priorities. Number two, projects must be better prepared before they enter into implementation, because weak planning at the start often causes delays. And so the provinces must be clear about what the project looks like, what the planning is, before they start on implementation. Then number three, there must be stronger procurement planning and stronger management of contractor performance. And this is where things go wrong, Honorable Member, because a school may be identified as a priority school that for refurbishment, but for some reason, a contractor will walk off site or whatever the case may be, and we need to hold contractors far more accountable. In my view, I think contractors who do business with the state and who don't perform or who walk off projects should actually be banned from doing work with the state again. Why is it that a contractor in Limpopo that didn't finish work can pop up in the Eastern Cape and still be awarded a government contract? We should be able to say, if you can't be trusted to do the work that you said you were going to do, then you must never do business with the state again. Then fourth, I think provinces need tighter monitoring and reporting so that stalled projects are identified early and corrective action is taken quickly. And I think finally, where existing budgets are not enough to address the scale of the backlog, the sector must pursue additional funding mechanisms. And I think this is important to look at blended financing models that Treasury is looking into. And we must be creative in saying, we can't simply sit back and say, we don't have 140 billion rand, so what do we do? Education is immediately realizable as per the Constitution. So we have to make sure that we work together with provinces, but greater planning, greater consequence management on contractors. Don't implement until you are ready and you've done your planning. And also, let's aggressively start making sure that we prioritize those particular schools. And the member did furnish me with the name of the school. I want to undertake that I will follow up with the MEC. My office has taken note of that name of that school, and we will follow up on it and be able to at least give this House chairperson a written response on what the plan is with the infrastructure there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's go to the Honourable Badenhorst for a follow-up question.
Honourable Minister, welcome in the House. Once again, it's great to have a competent minister in the House. Unfortunately, Honourable Minister, not all the members in the House are as competent as you in preparing their questions, which brings to mind the question that's just been asked by Honourable Mokwele through Honourable Feni, who doesn't seem to realize that school infrastructure is actually a provincial competency. Which brings me to my question, Honourable Minister. What measures do you plan to put in place to deal with MECs who has oversight over this crumbling school infrastructure that jeopardizes the safety of our school children, as so eloquently pointed out in the question by Honourable Mokwele and Honourable Feni? Thank you very much for being the MPs here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Badenhorst. If you can reply to that, please, Minister.
I don't want to laugh into the Hansard chair. I was just taking a moment to giggle first. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And it's an important question that the member asks, because everywhere you go, people say, but then if this is a provincial competency, how then do you hold MSCs to account? And the truth of the matter is that this is a very complex government or governance model, because provinces hold the power, provinces hold the budgets, appointments of MECs are done by premiers, the equitable share to education is done by premiers to the MECs. What we hold at a DBE level are conditional grants. And that's where we can really hold people to account, because Treasury makes it very clear that if you get a school nutrition conditional grant and you don't spend it on school nutrition, that grant can be taken away from provinces. So that is where we are able to hold provinces to account. And of course, this is more of a collaborative, governing model, because we meet as the Council of Education Ministers, and we show them, for instance, that things around underspending, infrastructure underspending, to say you are in the red province A. You need to make sure that if it's invoices that have not been paid, you need to make sure that this is the case. Because also, I'm not going to defend, I think, provinces that are underspending on critical things such as infrastructure. We all took an oath to serve, and to serve to the best of our ability. And if there are problems, things like floods, construction mafia and the like, then those are the problems. But it can't be the norm that we've got perpetual underspenders on such a critical issue in education. And so it really does bother me that the way that the governance model is set up, Honourable Member, is such that I can cooperate, I can push the provinces, I can write to the premiers and say, we've got a problem here. There's a problem brewing here. You're going to underspend. For instance, in KwaZulu-Natal, that department was placed under Section 18 of the PFMA because obviously of governing issues. So there are ways and tools and means to say, if you don't spend, province B is spending. we will move that money over. Many provinces, in fact, Limpopo was one of the provinces that lost some money, I think, in the last financial year because they were not spending at the level at which they needed to spend. And we could shift monies to other provinces because we can't allow that money to go back to Treasury. Allowing that money to go back to Treasury, it means that it's lost to the sector. And so if provinces aren't spending, there are conditions that Treasury gives us so that we can hold them accountable. If they misuse the grants on conditional grants, we can take it away. But of course, we don't want to get there because it's about the learner at the end of the day. And so it would really be helpful if we could all hold ourselves to a higher standard of performance so that we can say that all 13.7 million learners in our country are served and they're served well. But in order to force provinces to do better, we have to be harsher on ourselves and say, you don't spend, so different provinces will spend, but we're not losing this money to the sector. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. The next supplementary question will be posed by the Honourable Gericke.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good afternoon, Minister. I am so humbly grateful that you gave Honourable Badenoch a selection on the issue of conditional grants because he tends not to understand the difference between the mandate and conditional grants. He confuses the stuff all the time. And he's from the DA. He's from the DA. Minister, Minister, there are still too many unsafe schools with dilapidated infrastructure. Year on year, there are promises to fix this problem, but nothing happens. The EFF demands that you give timelines and proper information regarding the reparation of these schools, which are particularly situated in previously disadvantaged areas. If you go, for instance, to my own hometown in Packersdorp in George, you will see the Packersdorp Senior Secondary School is dilapidated for the last 20 years. Our people sit in broken doors, broken windows, and so on. And year after year, the MEC of Education in the Western Cape went there to make some promises, but nothing is happening. So we demand today that you give us clear-cut answers. I do understand what you have explained earlier on with regard to all the factors that play a role. But I mean, we must at least can say within the medium time framework or with the long term, what are the long-term plans and so on, and how will you exert pressure on the MECs to realize these objectives? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Gericke, and your reply to that, please, Minister.
Thank you very much. And an honourable member, I think for me, what is also quite important is, and I'm always very careful not to paint a rosy picture of our education system, because I think all of us have touch points with it in one way or another. And people know what they see on the ground. It goes far beyond just PowerPoint presentations that are presented to you. So I take the point, and I've noted the school, and the team is here. I've noted the school that you're talking about in George. I am pretty sure that is probably high up on the MEC's list, because the MEC in the Western Cape has started what they call the Rapid School Build Program. And what that program seeks to do is it seeks to essentially halve the time that it would take any ordinary department, that it halves the time it takes to build a school. In fact, the Rapid School Program has produced schools within 70 days, where they are working around the clock to make sure that they keep up with the pressure of the schools. Now, this is not just something that's unique to the Western Cape or any others. Gauteng, for instance, similar problem, where as parents are moving to areas of economic prosperity, that province has to accommodate so many more new learners and very late applications. So you will see that they will add mobile classrooms. They'll try and make additions to the schools. So provinces like Western Cape, KZN, and Gauteng in particular will always face the issue around infrastructure backlogs because of the sheer volume of people who are descending into those areas. And so I think, as I said, I think it probably is on his radar. In our CEM, the Council of Education Ministers, we have provinces where we share best practice. For instance, recently, MEC Limpopo was sharing with us what they're doing to get such good maths and science results. And one of the other learning points was the Western Cape sharing with their colleagues around the Rapid School Build program. And what's really important, I think, with that program is the time that it takes. There's nothing worse than allocating funds for the building of a school and it takes 7 years. Because the overruns, it costs the state money and people are waiting and it gets vandalized in the process. That's why I said to Honorable Feni a little bit earlier on that it is my view that a contractor who does shoddy work at a government project, they should never be allowed to do government work again. Because it's the very communities that you're talking about, Honorable Member, that end up suffering because other contractors are walking off site or they simply just don't start. So the team is here. I've taken note of Pekal Stop in George, and I will definitely raise this with the province. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Honourable members, the next supplementary question will again be posed by the Honourable Feni, this time in his own capacity. Honourable Feni.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yeah, I'm covered.
Thank you very much, Honourable Feni. That takes us then, Minister, to the next question. The question was posed originally by the Honourable Kennedy, the Economic Freedom Fighters representative from the Limpopo province. It relates to evaluating effectiveness of SGBs. It's enumerated as question 1. If you can reply to the question, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Do you see why I like to be in the National Council of Provinces more than in the NA? Honorable Feni said he's covered. He doesn't need to add anything more. But thank you very much to the Honorable Member for the question. The school governing bodies are very central to democratic school governance. In terms of the South African Schools Act, the governance of every public school is vested in the SGB, while the professional management of the school is undertaken by the principal. And the authority of the relevant, and obviously the provincial authority being the Provincial Education Department. The Act also requires that the head of each provincial education department must provide introductory and continuing training to governing bodies to ensure that principals and departmental officials render the support necessary for governing bodies to perform their functions effectively. So the DBE supports provinces to evaluate SGB effectiveness through structured national tools, provincial monitoring processes that assess whether or not school governing bodies are carrying out their statutory functions. These include the SGB functionality tool, a standardized instrument used to assess whether SGBs are performing their core governance functions properly. But what are their core governance functions? Their core governance functions are the adoption and the implementation of key policies, the financial oversight and accountability, support for discipline and school safety, and stakeholder participation. And so those are the things that we support SGBs with. In addition, provinces with support from the National Department use national SGB functionality and sampling and a survey approach to identify whether or not SGBs meet the minimum governance requirements, and they flag schools where this is not happening. The department also engages with SGB associations, parent structures to strengthen democratic participation. I have found that where a school is most successful is when it's got a functional SGB and a very good school leadership. I think once those two things work in tandem, schools tend to perform well. So the functions of SGBs could not be overstated. However, then how do we then make sure that those that are underperforming, as the question asked, well, we make sure that there's orientation, induction, and continuous training of SGB members, that there's school level plans developed with the district, that we are monitoring through district support visits and structured reporting and escalating where governance issues persist, And we measure and strengthen parental engagement through grade meetings, learning support engagement, and improved communication between parents and the school. And so, yes, I'll end it there. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's ask Honourable Kennedy for a follow-up question.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Minister, during our oversight visit to Naledi Miso, it was very clear to us that the SGB there was not doing their duty. Now, Minister, what specific consequence management have you initiated against this SGB for failing to monitor the frequent absence of the principal and the unauthorized changing of subject groups during mid-year, which directly contributed to the 0% pass to this Naledi Miso? And how does the your department plan to monitor the fidelity of implementation to ensure that the training of the SGBs is translated into practical school-level act? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Kennedy. If you can reply to that, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Yes, I first want to deal with the issue the Honourable Member is raising of the Naledi Miso Secondary School, which recorded a 0% pass rate in 2025, a matric pass rate. In response to this, the Limpopo Department moved very urgently at the start of 2026. We had an engagement with them to ask exactly the question that you're asking about what were some of the factors that led to this outcome. So at the start of the academic year, they immediately entered the school. They're providing the school with the full package of support to stabilize the school and improve results. The provincial leadership also intervened immediately. The school has now effectively been adopted for ongoing support, and the head of department is receiving weekly progress reports and will visit the school monthly. Teaching and governance support has been strengthened through the deployment of 2 additional educators at the school, the appointment of an acting principal, and the election of a new SGB. And the governance and the financial management training is scheduled to take place on the 12th of March, which happens to be in 2 days' time. Learners have already received tablets with laptops and projectors, which are due on the 23rd of March. The academic recovery support is also reinforced through partners such as FACET, Capitec, FNB, and NGOs, and a twinning arrangement with another secondary school providing tutoring over the weekend. The aim is to have sustained support for this school so that we can never see what happened in 2025 happen again. So that is the full package of support that the school is receiving. As I said, it wasn't just you that was shocked. I myself, when I saw that they'd received 0% pass rate, was very concerned about what had happened. And so that's what we've done through the Department of Education in Limpopo. So I have faith that we'll be able to turn around not only the governance issues, but also the academic performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The next supplementary will be put by the Honourable Masumpa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Minister. It is a known fact that for any school to excel, it depends on collaboration between school management, teachers, parents, and learners. It is totally unacceptable for a school to record a 0% pass rate in matric, given that they have a low learner enrollment. My question is, what steps the ministry takes to ensure that the specific school will receive required support, especially employing teachers that the school needs? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Masumpa. Your response to that, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Like as I was explaining to Honourable Kennedy, that the province has done a number of things. Number one, replacing the SGB, that the old SGB was disbanded, dissolved. And so there's a new SGB, there's an acting principal, 2 additional educators have been deployed there, tablets, laptops have been deployed to the school, the HODs having monthly reports with the school. So we are turning around not only just the governance issues there, but also the academic performance. I agree with you. There shouldn't be a school that records 0% pass rate. And so therefore getting to the core of what were some of the governance issues that affected that has been important. But as I was answering Honorable Kennedy, those are the steps that we're doing for that specific school in particular.
Thank you, Minister. Let's go to the next supplementary, which will be put by the Honourable Adriansa.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I nearly got up too early. So, Honourable Minister, in this case, we had the shock of our lives with the 0% pass rate. We even thought maybe nobody pitched for the exam. But you alluded to that the whole SGB has been dissolved. And in experience and from experience, we have noticed that some SGBs become over-politicized. And that affects the whole relationship with the school principal, with everything. And I want to ask you, will you commit to the department to conduct an assessment linking the functionality of SGBs to learner performance outcomes to demonstrate if evidence exists that stronger SGB governance and involvement leads directly to improved academic results? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Adriansa. Please reply to that, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. It is deeply unfortunate where SGBs are overly politicized, because the SGB is one of the most organized democratic institutions of our schooling system. And the reason why that is because one, you want to include parents in the decision making of the school. So, and SGBs have tremendous amount of powers. So that's why even with ourselves as the DBE, we work hard to make sure that they're empowered, they understand financial management, that they meet regularly, that the department supports them in being able to be fully functional. But also it's important that parents at the school understand that that school belongs to them. And so they need greater involvement in the SGB. And that's why there is this relationship, because the SGB is a representative of teachers, the representative of the parents of the school. And so it's very important. And there's a greater participation for parents than teachers, because ultimately the role of the SGB is for parents to have a greater say in how a school is run, how the code of conduct is determined, how the admission policy is determined. All of those things are absolutely important. And I think that schools will lose out on on the crucial relationship and the crucial functionality of an SGB if they allow themselves to be overly politicized instead of being more obsessed about the quality of the teaching happening at the school and the future of their children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're returning now to the virtual platform, and the next supplementary question will be posed by the Honourable Briet.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable Ministers, thank you for your answer. And I think it is the assistance and support that that the secondary school is having is exceptional and is good. But what has, and you've mentioned that the independence of SGBs are important, because it is, after all, the parents who have to take responsibility for the schools. But what is worrying, however, to me, Honourable Minister, is in your initial response to the original question, you said that you sample different SGBs to monitor them. So I would like to find out, and that is worrying, because effectively that means only when we get to 0% pass rate will we actually realize there is a problem if we do not monitor regularly all the SGBs. How is your department with the provincial departments looking at having broader monitoring and evaluation of SGBs to ensure that those SGBs that are suffering and that are lacking are actually assisted before we see a 0% pass rate? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Brett, and please reply to that, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Yes, of course. So the sampling that I'm referring to is the work that we would do as a Department of Education at a national level, because we would receive reports from provinces that says all our SGBs are fully functional. And of course, we've got a responsibility to go monitor and do oversight on those statistics. As I indicated to you, it's not simply enough to just receive reports. You yourselves as a department need to make sure that that is happening on the ground. And so that's the sampling that I'm referring to say that we would then go and sample to see whether or not and the sample is healthy enough for you to be able to see whether or not what we are receiving as a report from provinces is in fact accurate. But as I indicated also initially in my answer, is that provinces should be doing not only once-off orientation for SGBs, but they should be doing continuous empowerment for SGBs. SGBs have enormous powers, and it's important that even now that we've had legislation in the sector, that they're empowered, they understand what that means, they understand how they must change their ways of doing things. And even as we're dealing with issues around bullying in schools, incidents that we've seen really increase over time, SGBs have tremendous amount of powers to be able to say, as a school, how are we going to deal with this issue? So provinces are doing continuous empowerment of SGBs, but ultimately we would sample then as the National Department to see whether in fact this is indeed happening. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, on your responses. Now we come to question number 21, asked by Honourable Mhlongo from KwaZulu-Natal, which is dealing with learners with special education needs. Over to you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Chair. Transport for learners with special education needs is not just a luxury. It is often the difference between being in school or being left out of school altogether. The information provided by provinces indicates that 12,575 learners with special educational needs who qualify for learner transport are currently not receiving it across 106 schools. The provincial figures provided by the departments are as follows. In KwaZulu-Natal, we are sitting with over 9,000 learners across 65 schools. In the Eastern Cape, over 1,000 learners across 22 schools, and in Limpopo, 329 learners across 8 schools. Chairperson, these figures are serious, especially in the case of KwaZulu-Natal. It's important to clarify that learner transport is implemented at a provincial level jointly by the provincial education departments and provincial education and provincial departments of transport, funded through provincial budgets. The role of the DBE is to provide policy guidance, exercise oversight, and raise delivery failures through our intergovernmental structures. And these numbers, for me, Chairperson, as the executive authority in the sector, these numbers are not good, and in fact they're an indictment, because, as I said, scholar transport for learners with special learning needs sometimes means exclusion versus inclusion. Where qualifying learners are not transported, the consequences are immediate: poor attendance, interrupted learning, strain on families, and in some cases, complete exclusion from school altogether. And so this is why the department will continue to press provinces to strengthen the following. Number 1, planning. Number 2, budgeting. Number 3, contract management. Number 4, route provision. Number 5, payment systems, and where required, the availability of suitable and adapted vehicles. Because in some instances, a normal car would not necessarily be what is needed for somebody with special education needs. Learners with special education needs must be prioritized. Inclusion is not a luxury. It's a constitutional obligation. And so these three provinces that I've highlighted here, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that all of those kids who are deserving of scholar transport to go to school receive that scholar transport as is per our constitutional obligation. And so access to school must not depend on whether or not a family can somehow overcome transport barriers or a family can pay. We must make sure that we prioritize the most vulnerable amongst us. And I can guarantee you that we will be monitoring this issue very closely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The first follow-up question will come from Honorable Mhlongo from KZN.
Thank you so much, Chair, and greetings to you, Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for your response. Special needs kids are kids that are very close to my heart. With regards to your response, Minister, on the ground, I'm going to make reference to Kalipa Special School. It's in Guamashu. 300 out of 475 learners with special needs, educational needs, are currently struggling to attend school due to breakdown of scholar transport caused by lack of fuel, drivers, and vehicle maintenance. Given these learners qualify under the National Learner Transport Policy, what urgent interventions has your department put in place to restore transport services immediately? And how will you ensure that the children with disabilities are not excluded from education because of provincial administrative failures? Thank you.
Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you, Honorable Member, that children should not be the victims of mismanagement of government money, of mismanagement and poor budgeting priorities. In KwaZulu-Natal, Mosi, KwaZulu-Natal accounts for the largest number with over 9,000 learners across 65 schools that are currently not being transported. This does require urgent intervention. I've taken note of the school that you're talking about in Guamashu. The team is here. And we will continue to engage with the Department of Education in KZN. But perhaps maybe let me take this moment to just say to members that KwaZulu-Natal finds itself in an unenviable position, where there has been questionable policy-making decisions, budgeting priorities over a decade. And now the province finds itself in a scenario where it owes debtors billions of rands to the point where they're unable to use what is allocated for them for specific functions for those functions. So one of the issues that you raise is around scholar transport. And I'm very much aware, and I'm acutely aware, particularly for schools with children with special education needs, that this has been an acute issue that has been brought to my attention, and we've been sending it to them. But my worry with the department is that the problems are systematic. Yes, we can resolve the issue of the breakdown in the school Guamashu, but the province needs to turn its finances around. And that's why we've got the intervention of Treasury there with the Section 18 of PFMA. So what we want to do on our side is to support the MEC and his team to make sure that they get out of the financial black hole they find themselves in. Because at the genesis of all of the problems that arise from KZN produced the most amount of bachelor passes. It came number one. And on top in metric results. So the problem is not the teachers, the district directors, the officials. Clearly, those people are dedicated. The problem is systematic and it's government related. And I agree with you, no child should suffer because administrators and politicians failed to run government departments effectively. So we will support them. Last year, we went to go have a meeting with the Premier, with the MEC, and the MEC for Finance. And we said, we are your partners. We want to support you to turn this thing around. You house one of the largest numbers. In fact, KZN has the largest numbers of learners. We cannot afford to allow KZN to not be able to perform because it has the largest number of learners. I think it's got over 2 million of our 13.7 million learners in the system are in KZN. So the crisis of KZN is one of the things that keeps me up at night. But ultimately, the solutions come from the province and have to come from the province to turn the situation around. But I've taken note of the school, in particular in Kwamashu, and I would like an opportunity to follow up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up question will come from Honorable Sibande from Mpumalanga.
Thank you, Minister. We understand that the demand exceeds the supply for specialized school transport for children with special needs in South Africa. Besides the vehicles themselves, do the provincial department ensures that where this transport is available, they have attendants to assist the learners with special needs in those vehicles? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. As I said, access for children with special educational needs should not be a luxury. It should be something that is guaranteed. And you're absolutely right, as I indicated earlier, that it's not just about providing transport. It's also about providing transport of adaptive vehicles. Because, for instance, if a child, for instance, is in a wheelchair, they would need to be transported in a particular way where that car is able to take those wheelchairs in and transport it to schools. So right now, I think our big priority is to make sure that we identify, as we have in preparation for this sitting, we identify where the big problem areas are. And as I indicated, it's KwaZulu-Natal, it's the Eastern Cape, and Limpopo that have the most problematic numbers. And it will mean that we need to engage with them to say, how are you managing to make sure that those numbers go down? And as I was explaining in the previous question, that the issue around KZN is because they'll immediately say, we don't have the money. And so we have to find creative ways to say that, well, the exclusion of children with special education needs can't be tolerated. And we have to find a way, whether it's through the Premier's intervention, whether it's through whatever means in the province, to be able to turn the situation around. The reason why this becomes complicated when a province doesn't have money to fulfill basic things that they need to do is because there's no legal instrument through which Treasury can bail out a government department. So what they have in the pot is what they have. What then needs to happen is how they spend what they have in the pot. And so that's what becomes difficult, and that's why I'm saying we are wanting we're saying to KZN that in particular we stand ready to support you to turn the situation around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up is from Honorable Du Plessis, Gauteng.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, in light of the recent concerns regarding scholar transport that we all are taking quite seriously, how is the department working with provincial transport authorities to ensure that vehicles transporting learners, particularly those with special needs, comply fully with the National Land Transport Act and related safety regulations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you're absolutely right. I think it becomes such an important thing. As I said, adaptive vehicles are important. It's not just making sure that children are able to get to school, but it's how they're transported that becomes incredibly important. So the steps that we are taking, obviously, as we're working with the provinces are working with the Department of Transport at a local level, and even when there's contracts that are being awarded to scholar transport providers, those scholar transport providers who are working with schools or with schools catering to learners with special educational needs, they need to make sure that they are vetted and they're accredited to be able to make sure that they're ferrying learners around. As a member here raised the issue around somebody bringing up one vehicle when they're coming to accredit, and then 6 months down the line, they're using another vehicle. That's why continuous assessment of these things is important. And I think the work between the PEDs, the provincial education departments, and Department of Transport and the law enforcement agencies, and the kind of on the ground and more boots on the ground work that they are wanting to do, particularly in during peak time is going to be important for that kind of thing, to make sure that when there's no overcrowding, to make sure that these adaptive vehicles are available. But it is a challenge, honorable members, and I must be honest, especially when provinces are saying, we barely can be able to pay the bill for scholar transport. But ultimately, it's not either or. And that's what I want to make clear, that it's not either normal public transport or this, that all children, in accordance to the Constitution, have a right to access to education. And should they have education, special education needs, we need to meet them where they are. So it's not a matter of prioritizing the one over the other. And so that's something that we need to push ourselves more on to make sure that we are not the hindrance to access to education, particularly for those learners, because as I indicated, the results are dire. Children can drop out of school entirely. And I have visited schools of children with special education needs, and I can tell you that those children cannot be stopped. They are producing quality things that you would buy from a shop. I have seen schools that are doing tremendous amount of things. So we must never, ever as a country essentially neglect people because for some reason it's costly for us to cater to them. We must just up our socks and hold ourselves to a higher standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up question will come from Honorable Mampuru, replacing Honorable Swissa.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. Minister, as you have rightly so that all learners must have access to education, which is a different story when it comes to Ratlamelang School for the Blind in Kimberley, where parents have to source their own transport to transport their children to school, with some of them having to choose to withdraw their children from the schooling system completely. In light of this, Minister, what steps have you taken to ensure that the scholar transport reaches all learners, in particular from poor community with special needs who currently do not have access to schooling? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Chair. Thank you very much. And absolutely, honorable member, this is a very serious issue because, as I said to Honorable Duplessis, that it's not an either or. It's not a matter of whether or not a province can provide scholar transport for one set of children and not the other. We simply have to do it. We have to make sure that, particularly as you said, when I was talking about scholar transport a little bit earlier in the session, I explained that the criteria that is used for who deserves scholar transport more than anyone, number one is children with special education needs. They feature number one predominantly if you've got a challenge in getting around of mobility, whether you are blind, whether you are in a wheelchair, whatever the case may be, number one criteria is there. The second criteria is what you raise, the issue around rural and farm areas and far-flung areas. That's the second criteria. So the question you ask, what are you going to do about it? Ultimately, provinces must understand that when they divvy up their budget, this is for education, this is for health. When then the departments of education themselves are allocating funding to functions, they must understand the scale of the problem. How many children do we have that we need to ferry around to schools? And they need to allocate properly and they need to plan accordingly, because that's where the problem lies, is where you are trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. So then you shortchange on this one function and you simply don't cover children in where they need to be. So that's the real challenge that provinces are facing, that because of austerity measures of the last 10 years, the budget has not kept up with the scale and with the pressure and the growth of the system. So I have great sympathy for provinces because a lot of this, they are absorbing a lot of unfunded mandates. They've been doing so for the past 10 years. And so there has been a lot of financial pressure on them. And so no additional money is being allocated. So it's difficult. But ultimately, I think my view is we've got to make some tough decisions. That's what a home in distress does. when you are bankrupt, you make some tough decisions to say, we will prioritize this, but we're not going to prioritize that. And I think for me, one of the things that needs to happen is there's some bitter pills to swallow to say some of these things are nice to have, but we need to get out of this fiscal financial hole. And I'll continue pestering the Minister of Finance. He probably hates to see me calling him. I'll continue pestering him for more money for the sector because our problems are many, and yet we house the future of the country right here in the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We now come to question number 9, asked by Honorable Finis, which deals with the improvement of foundational learning. Over to you, ma'am.
Chairperson, thank you. Improving foundational learning in the early years is one of our central priorities because a learner who cannot master reading and basic numeracy in the early grades, as they are far more likely to struggle later in the curriculum. The department has therefore taken steps to strengthen support in grades R to 3. On literacy, the department has published the South African National Reading Strategy Plan for 2024 to 2030. The strategy provides a clear national framework to improve reading for meaning, with particular focus on strengthening literacy in African languages and bilingual contexts, improving access to quality reading material in all official languages, supporting teachers with better professional development, practical classroom guidance, and mobilizing parents and caregivers to support reading at home and in schools. We've also managed to really, through the generosity of some of our partners, managed to find partners who are willing to fund libraries in schools, particularly in schools in township areas or in schools that are in rural areas, where if there isn't a physical structure of a library, where there will be trolley libraries that can be brought into the school so that there can be a reading culture where children can take books home, they can read to their caregivers, and their caregivers can read to them. As I indicated, I've also ensured that the 2026 to 2027 annual performance plan includes a review and the strengthening of the implementation plan for the National Reading Literacy Strategy so that it contains a minimum integrated package of supports to improve literacy in grade R to 3. This is important because we need greater consistency in what reaches classrooms. That includes planning, teaching support, quality materials, practical tools for teachers, and supports of districts. So this work is extremely important to me because I truly do believe that we are not going to be able to change the education system around in South Africa if we don't get the foundations right. On numeracy, the members asked, the department is sharpening its focus. As I indicated earlier, we have what we call the Math, Science and Technology Conditional Grant, which is the one that goes to provinces. And we're having a sharper focus in how do we use that grant to also strengthen foundational numeracy, not only just focusing on learners between grades 10 and 12. In monitoring these interventions, the department works through the provinces, the districts, to make sure that we do routine monitoring and supporting visits so that we can really see the change. For me, more than anything, the practical implementation of the strategy is going to either show us in a year or two, or in 10 years' time, that we made the right investments by planting early and planting strong and making sure that the foundations are solid before we start expecting the education system to do things that we were not able to get right. So I'm confident that with this reading strategy that we'll be able to see commendable shifts. I want to change the statistic around children who are unable to read and read for meaning in our country. It's incredibly important. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Finis, you can ask the next follow-up question.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Minister. It is understandable and it is acknowledged that the strategy is in its initial stage. But we believe that any program should have a monitoring and evaluation element. Can Minister please indicate to us, did you appraise yourself as to the progress being achieved by this set strategy and plans?
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. You're absolutely right. And that's why I've been lamenting and saying I'm excited that we've put the strategy and key indicators in the annual performance plan, because that says that I'm willing to put my head on the block on its effectiveness and efficacy and the implementation thereof. I'm also willing to commit my entire department in making sure that we do this. But it's important that we don't just leave things as APP targets, because it's easy to say we've gone to 5,000 schools and you tick that as a box. And this is the culture I'm trying to inculcate, I think, amongst all of us in the department, that we must be obsessed with changing the reality, not just meeting the targets. We must be obsessed with outputs. I want to see a South Africa where a child can get to grade 1, being able to write their name and read with some level of meaning in some language. But that requires us to really, really, really commit, not only just to the strategy, but to the vision itself. I don't enjoy reading and seeing South Africa being ranked low when it comes to literacy and numeracy rates. And so I'm saying to the department, beyond just APP targets, let's be obsessed with making the change. Let's be obsessed with saying no stat will ever come back saying 8 out of 10 children cannot read in any language in the country. We must be obsessed with changing that story. And that goes beyond just meeting a target, going to a meeting and saying, oh, I've met this target. Be obsessed about the outputs. Is the strategy working? When we go and monitor in the provinces, are we seeing a marked difference? How is the strategy linking with our ECD strategy of saying we want children to come from ECD straight into grade R and therefore being able to read and count confidently in that way? So all of these things start together. And one of the things that I think is important to your question about the success of it is to view the education system as not in silos or broken down, but literally from 0, from cradle to 18 and beyond. Because once we view and think of it like that, then we understand that we have much of a responsibility to the matric learner than we do to the 2-year-old that needs to go into an ECD that's structured. Because the things that the foundations we will lay with that 2-year-old will determine how they perform when they're 18 and they're leaving school. So as I said, for me, it's more than just a strategy. It's a reorientation, a complete relook of our education system and trying to create some coherence with it so that we can change the picture that we have been seeing for a while. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up question is coming from Honorable Press from the Eastern Cape.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, how is your department ensuring that teacher training, learning materials and classroom support in the foundation phase are aligned with the goal of ensuring that every learner can read for meaning by the end of grade 3?
Over to
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. You're absolutely right. I mean, any strategy, and to the Honorable Member's point earlier about how will you measure the efficacy of the strategy. With every strategy you have in education, you have to take along your role players. And teachers are critical to that. If you remember what I said a little bit earlier, that historically teachers who weren't very good at their job would be sent to go teach grade 1, grade 2, as though that work is not specialized work. I'm glad we've come to the realization in South Africa that actually foundation phase teaching is a specialized skill. Similar to how you would want to go find a maths teacher, a science teacher, foundation phase teaching is just as skillful as you need those people to be. So the first thing is to make sure that your pipeline of teachers who are coming in are teachers who are aligned to your strategy. So your strategy being, we start them early. We start them with their home language. Also, another skill that is really important. Many teachers don't know how to do this, but bilingual teaching is also a skill that's needed. If we're saying home languages are important in being able to bridge the gap between not being able to read and literacy, then you need a teacher who's going to be able to cultivate the use of the home language in order for that child to pick up an additional language at another time. And so the point you make is a real one. So a couple of things we've done. Number one, it's the pipeline. I've said the Funza Lushaka bursary scheme. Now the majority, 60% of the learners who are on that scheme are people who are wanting to pursue foundation phase teaching. We are putting some investment behind mother tongue-based bilingual education because that's an important tool for us to improve literacy. That Funda Uphumelele survey feeds into that mother tongue-based bilingual education strategy. Number 3, making sure that we take our teachers along with us so that we can say, right, this is important, this is how we are teaching the foundation phase. The exciting thing, which is what I mentioned earlier, was the partnership that we got into with UNISA. That's taking on grade R teachers, grade R practitioners who are not qualified teachers to be able to go to UNISA and study, what do they call it, distance studying. But that's incredible because for me now, for the first time, a grade R practitioner who used to earn a stipend will now become a fully fledged educator in the classroom. Firstly, that's powerful for themselves as a massive way of really empowering themselves and obviously remuneration. But what does it mean for that 6-year-old? All of a sudden, it's not the riffraff of people that are sent to go teach and look after children. They're not being told that sleep and play and then go home. All of a sudden, a 6-year-old in South Africa has a qualified teacher standing in front of them saying, here's the lesson plan, here's the phonics, this is what we're going to do. And that excites me because I think even if we don't see massive results in the next year, I certainly think we will see a massive difference if we follow the strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up question will come from Honorable Mampuru from Gauteng Eqoli.
Thank you, Minister. You know, Minister, in the early 2000s, when I was in secondary school, we were 84 in a class that was supposed to only take 34 students. And we struggled because our teacher could not have access to give support to some of the learners who struggled with either numeracy or literacy. That was the problem of overcrowding. The same thing still persists now. So my question is, what is the minister going to do in terms of intervention in all the overcrowded schools to assist the learners who are struggling to comprehend learning in terms of literacy and numeracy? Thank you.
Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope the honourable member is going to be able to plug me with his headgear. I really like it. I would love to procure one for myself as well. But no. Thank you very much. Honourable member, it's an important point, and what you raise is a crucial point where you say in the early 2000s, that was 26 years ago, where the issue of overcrowding is happening. And so really, the truth of the matter is the fiscal envelope of our country is not able to keep up with the demand that we place on it. So two things can be true at the same time. I'm harsh on provinces on financial management, and when there's been poor financial management, well, then the consequences must follow. But at the same time, I am also sympathetic because about a decade ago, our government made a decisive shift to fund basic education less and higher education more. And that has had serious consequences for the sector. But now we're also adding 6-year-olds as being compulsory without additional budgeting. Provinces now have to take that on and they have to absorb that. When we looked at how much would be needed to plug the gaps here and there, we found that they would need about 17 billion rand. So provinces had to shoulder that then and say, well, because this is now legislation, it's now compulsory, we have to make sure every child has access to grade R. So I take your point, and as I indicated earlier with the infrastructure question, we have 140 billion rand in infrastructure backlogs. But we can't simply just fold our hands. Number one, it starts with proper financial management at the provincial level. It says also spend your budget and spend it well. Plan effectively as a province. Don't underspend your infrastructure budget or you will lose it. Make sure that you prioritize particularly schools that are dilapidated, schools that are of danger to children, and schools that need to be removed of asbestos. Yes, the need is greater than our revenue or our cash flow in the sector, but we must be able to demonstrate to Treasury that In fact, we are spending. The little that you are giving us, we are spending it, we are changing lives so that we can be able to make the case of why we need additional funds. We've also looked at working with Infrastructure South Africa. We had an exciting meeting several weeks ago where we're looking at BFI funding, which is a form of a blended financing, and where we can tap into Infrastructure South Africa, not only just looking at just the equitable share. So there are a number of things that we're trying to do to reduce those numbers. The other issue that I just wanted to just touch on is reviewing what we call the post-provisioning norms. The post-provisioning norms are the ratio that we use of saying 1 is to 35, so one teacher amongst 235 children. That policy hasn't been reviewed in 20 years. So we need to review that, looking at the size and the shape and the size of our education system currently. And I think if we do those things, one, spending wisely and effectively, reviewing the post-provisioning norms, being creative in how to find further financing for infrastructure projects, we may be able to get there. But we can't simply fold our hands and say, oh, they didn't give us 140 billion. It's not going to come. We've got to make sure that as a sector, we are responsive to the crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. The next follow-up question comes from Honorable Mshongo from KZN.
Thank you so much, Chair. Honorable Minister, we already know that there's a huge gap between urban, deep rural schools and locations. So can you please clarify to us what practical classroom-based training, mentoring, and ongoing profession supports that has been provided for foundation phase teachers? And how is your department ensuring that educators in under-resourced schools receive the tools necessary for literacy and numeracy intervention to produce measurable improvement in learner outcomes? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Professional support remains incredibly important. As I said, you can't improve an education system without ensuring that you couple that up with Chair. The Honourable Member there is disturbing me. I don't know. He's making gestures. He's intimidating me. So professional support is an integral part of any strategy, because if you leave out the educator behind, essentially what you've done is you've just done things at a surface level. What is exciting is that we are coming up for the first time in 14 years, we haven't been able to update the foundation phase catalog of learning textbook material and workbooks. So what is exciting is that from 2027, provinces are going to be able to procure newly revised foundation phase textbooks and workbooks. And that's exciting because, of course, things have changed in a year, in a decade and a half. And being able to put those lesson plans in front of a teacher and say, this is how you structure a lesson plan. By the end of this week, this must be what the learners have covered. By the end of day 2, this is what the learners should have covered. And then they actually have workbooks where they write into those books. And of course, these textbooks, and then also more importantly, the readers. And that's why I was saying to you that also what has been really important has been these partnerships with people like Avbob, who are rolling out trolley libraries across provinces and saying, show us where your most vulnerable schools are. So, I mean, without trying to, I don't want to be overwhelmed, but if members do have a particular school, for instance, that needs something that doesn't require a tender, that needs a library, there's no reason for you not to write to me and say, there's a school in so-and-so that desperately needs a library, some books. As I say, I'm obviously constrained because I'm using the generosity of corporate partners. But what I'm trying to say, if it's something that can help teachers or that can help learners and where we can reach, we are more than happy to do so. And so that is how we're going to be supporting the foundation phase. So I'm really looking forward to what the next 3 years will do when we take the systemic exam again for grade 3s, because that cohort would have started grade R or grade 1 now. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this support that we are and this focus that we have on foundation phase, how that will translate to the outcomes of that systemic exam. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope I can come here 3 years from now to come and say to you, this is what has happened and this is how we've improved the system.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think that each and every member inside this House agrees with you that that foundational phase plan is credible, and then everyone just needs to put their hands on the deck so that we ensure that it is implemented. Without further ado, honorable members, we have come to the end of the questions to the Minister of Basic Education. I would like to thank the Honorable Minister for availing herself to answer the question. This concludes the business of the day. The House is adjourned.
Recording stop.